Hi, everybody. Welcome back to TSSA Talks. My name is Brian Johnson. I'm the Director of Player Development for Tennessee State Soccer Association. We are here at the Exit Inn, legendary rock music venue where a lot of other kinds of music and entertainment has happened over the last 40 years as well. But they're a great partner of us here at Tennessee State Soccer Association in this TSSA Talk series. We have a series of interviews we're doing, and our main goal is to shine a light on some underrepresented communities throughout U.S. soccer and Tennessee soccer in particular. And as a part of that, we have several different folks we're interviewing to begin this series. Today, we're happy to be joined by our boss. We're always happy to be joined by our boss, but our executive director at Tennessee State Soccer Association is Hans Hobson. Hans has had a long and varied career in and off the field, but all involving soccer. And so we're excited to talk to him today about his experiences in and around the game. So Hans, thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything you'd sort of like to add to that before we get started?
No, I'm excited to be here. I think this is much needed and making sure that we give underrepresented people in our sport a voice.
Awesome. Well, I know it's something that we all share as a passion, and thank you for being here. I think the first thing we're trying to do with all of our candidates, victims, if you will, is to have them sort of explain how soccer became a part of their lives, because you and I are similar in age. I'm definitely older, but I guess you can tell from Hans's young looks, but we, at a time when we grew up, soccer wasn't in everybody's life. So I think everybody's journey to soccer is interesting. Can you tell us about yours?
Yeah. Only older by a year, BJ. Come on. Soccer for me was kind of by happenstance. I mean, I think my dad grew up playing basketball. His mom did not want him to play football, so he wanted to steer me in a similar direction, but had some bad experiences with basketball. So soccer was evolving in our community about this time, recreational soccer. And so my dad signed me up. He took me to my first practice, and I'll never forget it. I think I've shared this story with you before, but there was our coach at the time was a police officer, a sheriff, and fully decked out, gun and everything. And my dad goes there, and everybody else is there with their mom. And so my dad walks up, and this sheriff walks over to my dad immediately and says, "Listen, I got called into duty tonight, so I'm not going to be able to do the boys' practice." My dad did not know anything about soccer, so what does he do? He jumps in and makes the best of a tough situation. And there began my soccer career. I loved it, fell in love with it. It was an absolute blast. My dad coached me he was an assistant coach for I think the next 2 years, and then became a head coach. And he did everything he needed to do, the Soccer for Dummy books and everything. But it was an absolute joy that first time being able to go out there on the field and score a goal, and just the feeling and emotion I got from that. I'm still doing it today.
Yeah. So we know about when that was. So that was late 70s, early 80s as you're starting to play soccer. Where was that? Where were you growing up?
Grew up in Martinsville, Virginia. Yeah, so a small little town in Martinsville. For those that don't know where it is, it's about an hour south of Roanoke, and there's a racetrack there. So if you're a NASCAR fan, there's a small track there in Martinsville, Virginia.
Okay, so you grew up in Martinsville. You started to play youth soccer there. Tell us kind of where, from those recreational sort of foundations that got built, the grassroots is important to all of us. That's your foundation story. That's where you started out. What was sort of the next step in your evolution in your playing career?
Yeah, no, I was probably 8 when I began playing soccer. So 12-ish, I guess, there was competitive soccer being born in our area, and I was scared to death. There was no way that I was going to step foot on that field. I didn't think I was good enough. And so some of my friends encouraged me, "Hey, look, you need to go do this." So around 13, I guess, 13 or 14 was when I started playing travel or competitive soccer. My dad was long since no longer helping out in that arena. And it was different, it was more competitive. The kids that I played with were at multiple different schools. It was the best of the community. And it was a challenge for me, but I was a fast kid, so this was a game where I could utilize that, and I wasn't the most technical player, but I was fast enough to get in behind lines and score goals. And that changed for me as I got older. In high school, I was a fast player as well, but college, I ended up moving back and became a defender. So some of those assets that I didn't develop, that technical skill, didn't suit me well as a forward. So in college, they moved me back in the back, and I went to a small little Division III school, Emory and Henry College in Virginia as well.
Okay, so Southern Virginia is kind of where all of this happens. As you're growing up with competitive soccer, as you started into those in your middle school and your high school years, how much were you guys traveling? How far were you going? Did you have paid coaches? What was the makeup of the team? What was the makeup of the coaches you interacted with?
No, that's a great question. We didn't travel that far. I mean, all over Virginia, we would go into North Carolina. For people that don't know, the East Coast, I mean, Virginia, North Carolina, it's a hotbed of soccer, so you don't really have to travel that far. An hour from us is Roanoke. An hour south is Greensboro, North Carolina. So Greensboro was a hotbed, and so we didn't have to travel far to get good soccer. Our coaches were volunteer. They may have paid some of our coaches as we were growing up, but this is probably the first time that I actually met some people that were very, very different from me. My first real travel coach was a guy by the name of Carlos from Argentina. And he was incredible. So we had him for a few years, and then we had another coach, Carlos as well, and he was actually from Mexico. So my senior year, he actually took us down to Mexico to San Luis Potosí, where he was from, and we stayed 2 weeks in Mexico. We played Mexican teams. I mean, it was just an unbelievable experience to be, in a culture that embraces soccer. I believe it was during the '90 World Cup, maybe. And so you're down there, you're immersed, and everything stopped. Everything stopped for soccer during the World Cup. Nobody was doing anything. Didn't matter who was playing, everything stopped. So it was cool to be able to have coaches like this that saw the game in a different way than we even saw it. And I think it helped me to become the coach and the player I am today.
Sure. So all those experiences are going to shape anybody. So you come up, you've got different coaches, and a lot of us, my first non-parent coach was when I was 18. So it sounds like you had a couple of guys. Those guys didn't have players on the team. They were just volunteers who coached.
Correct. No kids on the team. They were volunteers that coach, people in the community that had gotten here in the United States through their jobs or whatever it might have been, and they wanted to give back. I mean, they wanted to impart their knowledge on the youth. So, I mean, they were great. They were great role models, great coaches.
Well, it's interesting. One of our other interview subjects we spoke with earlier, Jamon Brady was talking about how, he was able to have his eyes opened by some things coaches did that were positive for him or that were negative for him. And also now how when he goes out and coaches, there's kids who are of a different ethnicity than him, who maybe that's the first experience they've had with somebody who's of a different ethnicity than them. You all of a sudden have worked. So a couple of those guys are Latino from South America, from very soccer loving countries. So a multicultural, faceted approach to soccer was just cooked into you, it sounds like, from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. I mean, if I have to go back and kind of even look at that team and how it was shaped, me and one other kid, our goalkeeper, who happened to be African-American, were on the same team. So you got two black kids on the same team, and that was pretty much it. But I never really kind of thought about it that way until now. Like, if I go back and I look at it, I'm like, okay, our team maybe wasn't that diverse, but the environment that we were in, the parents, the coaches, and everybody, it was a welcome environment. The game was a welcome game. I always have viewed the game as a game that is open for all of us, for all nationalities and races, and that's how it felt growing up. And I understand too, the position that I'm in today and some of the things that I see, referee reports and stuff like that. It's not that way for every kid.
Sure.
Not everybody feels that way. Not every parent feels that way. There are things that are going on in society today that my experience isn't the same. And so those experiences, as you said a second ago, they shape us. They make us, So the lens at which I see and grew up with in soccer is very important. But I also acknowledge that there are other people out there that haven't had that same lens.
Sure. I think even the leadership of those programs, and I'm thinking back now, I wouldn't have thought about it. It was a parent coach, but my U10 coach was originally Argentine. His family's still here. His daughter's still coaching in Tennessee State Soccer Association.
Yes.
Angela Arrieta.
Yeah.
George Arrieta was my coach. And so perhaps even not even recognizing it, the influence of different cultures, when it becomes a part of you at such a young age, you become used to it. You become prepared for it. I think some of those doors are maybe open to us we don't even realize at the time. Oh, that's awesome. Amen. I really appreciate the insight you're able to bring to us from that. So from those days you've played, you mentioned your high school career, you mentioned you went on and played at college. Everybody doesn't get that opportunity. So you achieved enough to have the opportunity to go to play at Emory and Henry. As you left Emory and Henry, how did you make the transition? It's a challenge for a lot of folks because at some point you're going to put your boots on sort of in anger for the last time. I mean, we still play. You still get out and play even more than I do. There's a lot of us who don't necessarily get out and play in a men's league or do things. You still are playing, and I appreciate the adult soccer that's a part of what we do. But at some point, you went from being a competitive player, pursuing competitive playing, to transitioning your role in the game. How did that transition happen for you?
It's a great question. I never really, my mom always told me one thing. She said, find something that you love and pursue that, and you're never going to work a day in your life. And so I was just like, well, soccer is what I love. I'm just going to keep doing that. So, not knowing any better, I'm going to play in the MLS. Well, then I get to college and I recognize I'm really not that good. I was an all-conference defender, so I was all right, but I was not that good. And so my undergrad was in athletic training. So I figured if I can't be in the MLS, I'm going to tape their ankles. As I'm doing that and that plan's working and I'm doing my undergrad in athletic training, I started doing soccer camps in the summer. So I'm going to soccer camps. I'm in and around teaching kids, and I'm like, wow, this is fun. I have a passion for this. So then in my mind, it was like, well, I'll be a coach. I'll be a college coach. So I'm like, I'm going to need to next work on my master's. So I'm like, I just got to keep going to school so I can actually coach at a college. I go to ETSU. I'm there, and somebody spots me coaching youth one day at Milligan College, John Garvilla. And John says, I want you to come work with us. So I coached 3 years at Milligan College, and just fell in love with giving back to the game, giving back to kids. I was also in an environment that we had kids from Brazil, we had kids from Kenya, we had kids from all over the United States. John was a very good recruiter. He could sell ice to Eskimos. You've met him. And that environment that I was around, I was like, man, I just want to be a mentor to kids. I want to help them. And what I had seen was that the kids that I was coaching really didn't know how to get to the college level. So kind of changed the direction of where I wanted to go, and decided that I wanted to be a youth coach. And so I moved to Knoxville, worked for a guy by the name of John Snyder with what was then Deodora Impact. And so just helping youth to be able to move to that next level and hopefully help them be ready and prepared for the college soccer scene.
Okay, so as we got into this point now, you've been through, you started as a recreational player, you played successfully through high school, played into college. After college, you figured, okay, there's a different path for me, a different way to give back. As we come back for our next part of the series, what I'd like to do is now you've gotten into the professional coaching ranks. You're a professional coach now. You've moved from college now. You've decided youth is where you fit in. Let's talk about the journey from starting as a youth coach in Knoxville to what's led you to today. That's what we'll do when we come back for part 2 of TSSA Talks with Hans Hobson.